Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this year's Massachusetts Advocacy Conference for the Southern New England Advocacy Conference. My name is Joseph Niski. I'm the host this year, and I'm very excited to interact with you all and get some questions, bring them to our incredible panelists, as well as help you all learn a bit more about the process of meeting with legislature and understanding what is the best way to approach helping local government and your state level government bring new bills and laws into action to assist robotics at your state level. We've got some incredible panelists today. We've got some other great speakers, and we've got a fun day set up for us. Hello to UConn. Hello to WPI. I hope you all are having a great day as well. Please, when we get started with questions, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and I will use that to field your questions, or please enter your questions in the chat, and I will direct them towards our panelists. So I think that is about it for me. Brandy, if you'd like to do an introduction as well, I can turn
Morning,
that over
everyone.
to you.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Brandy Bollinger, and I work for the REC Foundation, which is the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation. We are a nonprofit that runs the VEC Robotics Competition, VEC IQ Robotics Competition, Aerial Drones Competition, and Bell Advanced Vertical Robotics Competition. I am the New England Team Engagement Manager. So I cover all of New England. I'm actually based in Michigan and have been doing advocacy efforts with my own team, 2337, since about 2010. So I've been mentoring for about 17 years now. So if you guys have any questions about kind of like the history that I've been involved with advocacy, or kind of like how I support SASA, which we're going to hear from in a little bit, please let me know and I'm happy to discuss. Back over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brandy. And we've got four incredible panelists today. If the four of you all would like to take a moment and introduce yourselves as well, that'd be greatly appreciated.
I guess I'll go first here. Hi, everyone. My name is Arj Agarwal. I'm an intern at the Student Association for STEM Advocacy, and I am based out of Michigan, specifically Team 245 from the first robotics competition. Yeah, and I look forward to the opportunity of answering some of your questions here.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Ostreicher. I am currently in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a junior at Northeastern University. I graduated the Air Shirley Regional High School in 2021, where I participated on FRC Team 4905 for 4 years. And during those 4 years, I worked with State Representative Dan Stana to file H577 and S360 in the Massachusetts State Legislature, which is an act to establish an elementary and secondary school robotics grant program through the state of Massachusetts. So I'm very excited to meet with you all today. And yeah, look forward to answering your questions.
I'll go next. So hi, I'm Ava. I am also based out of Michigan, a part of the Student Association for STEM Advocacy, or SASA. I'm a part of Team 1718, the Fighting Pie, First Robotics Challenge, and these past 2 or 3 years, I've been attending the Michigan Advocacy Conference, along with this past year attending the National Advocacy Conference.
Yeah, and to follow up, Ava, I'm Nate. I'm a staff member at Student Association for STEM Advocacy. I'm also a first alum. I graduated from high school in 2020 from Team 1816, the Green Machine, out of Edina, Minnesota. I'm currently a student in Colorado.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for introducing yourself. We've very happy to have you all here today. For everybody else, as we go through questions today, please keep your cameras turned off unless you are asking a question. Panelists, please keep your camera on as well. We are very happy to see you and see you answer our questions. But otherwise, if anybody has questions, please feel free to use the raise hand feature in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to start it off with a question for the whole panel. Now, I believe all of you have done some work actually meeting with legislature. What was it like the first time you actually stepped into an office and started meeting with someone?
I guess I'll answer here first. So the first time I met with legislature was specifically at the National Advocacy Conference. I was super nervous, but it was with our local representative, Representative Alyssa Slotkin here out of Michigan, and it was just really nerve wracking because I didn't know what to expect, and a lot of you are gonna feel that way as well. You're gonna think you'll see these people on TV and you'll be like, hey, I can't meet with them, or you'll be a bit nervous. But you have to keep in mind, a lot of times you're meeting with them and your constituents. So they're going to really take care of you. Like when we were at Alyssa Slotkin's office, I mean, I'm talking, they gave us water, chips, other snacks. I mean, heck, they even offered a tour of the Capitol, but we couldn't do it because of time. So just like relax, take your time. Honestly, they really want to hear from you. So you're going to have fun. It's more fun than nerve wracking. And I wish I could go back in time and just tell myself to take a deep breath and really enjoy the moment.
I'll go after RJ, or Nate, are you gonna go?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go. My first meeting is the MITI conference with former Representative Jeff Yarrock. That it was a little nerve-wracking because I was really new to advocacy. I didn't really know what to expect. However, as time went on, it's more hard. It's kind of hard to stop. For me at least, I do. So when it's something that you are really passionate about, it's more easier to talk about it, especially when it comes to a program that you know very well. Even though mine was a meeting through a phone call, it was still just as important. Funny enough, former Representative Jeff Yarrock was coming to Armada, which is where I'm based out of, that same day. So it's kind of fun to meet with him and then also know that he's helping my community at the same time.
Olivia, if you'd like to answer next.
Sure. So actually, the first time I ever met with legislators was when I secured an internship with the state representative, Dan Sena, during my senior year of high school. And I took this internship with him. I'm actually a political science major in college. This is this advocacy project helped spark that interest. But I was already kind of interested in local and state politics. I took an internship with State Representative Dan Sena, and he gave me the opportunity to basically write, conceptualize, file, and work with a team of amazing mentors and students in Andromeda 1 to put this bill forward. So it was a little bit different because I was meeting him in a more professional environment. But as far as like the first time I had ever been advocating on behalf of the bill, to other legislators, that took the form of email, since this was during the pandemic that this was all starting to happen, during 2020 and 2021. So that type of advocacy is very different. Obviously, you're not seeing people face to face, but legislators are also checking their emails all the time from constituents, and from just whoever needs to communicate with them through that mode. So it's definitely a good skill to have. We got a lot of co-sponsors from the bill just through cold emailing, just sending people a personalized script of like why this bill matters, why this matters to students and communities, and for STEM education all across Massachusetts. But that was really my first type of advocacy, and I think I'll get more into later my tips for advocating in person.
Yeah, and to finish up, my first foray into advocacy was very non-formal. I was just working in our team pit at competition. A local representative at the competition, which was up in Duluth, came by, started talking to them. And then from there, my first official meeting was at the state level. And they start off very nerve-wracking. You're going to feel, I don't want to say out of your depth, because you're completely in your depth. You're more than capable of doing this work. But you're going to start off with a lot of that tension, a lot of those concerns. But as you work through it, as you speak to these people, you start to realize that they are just that. They're people. Like Arjit said, you're also their constituent. So they want to speak with you. They want to hear what's important to their communities. So yeah, my first foray, incredibly nerve-wracking for about 5 minutes. And then you settle in, take a deep breath. Helps that you're all very excited about the thing you're talking about. You're not coming in droning on about something you're not passionate about. So it is really, you just have to get over that initial hesitation, that initial kind of fear, and then it goes so smoothly after that.
Thank you for the answers. It's very cool to see where the four of you have come from and started and have continued along this process. So this is a question directed first towards Olivia, and then if everyone else has some advice they'd like to chime in with as well, please do. But first for Olivia, how is it, can you speak a bit about the language of bill or bills that were created, or general thoughts about like language to put into that and how you can learn about it?
Just to clarify, like you want me to explain like the thought put into the bill in Massachusetts and like the language put into that, just so I can understand.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
so
Yes.
we wanted to make this, well, first of all, we took a lot of inspiration from the bill that was passed in Michigan. So when I found out that there was Michigan people like speaking at this conference, I was so excited because you guys were in many ways a blueprint for a lot of the advocacy that has taken place, I think, throughout the rest of the country as far as these types of bills. But basically, the thought that went into it is we want to make this as broad as possible. We want to not only include, basically we want to make it presented in a way that we're not presenting this being like give money to First Robotics or Vex Robotics or whatever specific organization. This is really not about a organization or company. This is about STEM education. So the language in the bill is really broad and not specific to a robotics organization, any particular STEM organization. It really gives school districts the freedom to be able to run the programming that they want. The bill is really filed just to say, we need this type of funding. We have done the research, we have put in the work, we have outlined that there are school districts across the state of Massachusetts that really are lacking in these programs compared to other places around the state, including that language in the bill, and also saying with the filing of this bill, school districts in that state that apply for this funding will receive a priority. I think was really important and really helpful. But basically just giving the legislature as much freedom and as much freedom as possible to make this bill work for the Department of Education, essentially. It's basically just a very broad ask saying we need some sort of grant program here. We will work with the Department of Education. We will work with the relevant people to make this happen. But basically, we have outlined a need. We have the research to back it up. This is also happening all across of the United States, happening in New Hampshire and Michigan and different states that are very forward thinking about promoting STEM education. And we think that Massachusetts should be doing this as well. So that is basically the ethos of this bill.
And kind of specifically on the topic of wording about legislation, I think Olivia hit the nail on the head really well, but I want to reinforce, you don't have to go at it alone. There are a ton of resources. Michigan was a wonderful blueprint. They have their legislation's clear. It outlines the goals. It outlines the structure. It very evidently exposes how they want to approach STEM funding. There are states like Minnesota that have more unique programs. So looking across the board at the verbiage of the legislation and how different states are approaching it is a great place to start, because it's very scary entering advocacy, and you're gonna find a lot more success approaching legislatures with, hey, I've seen this verbiage in another state. and it had a huge impact. And my friends and peers from that state are expressing how impactful this is. Can we adapt this to our state, to our needs? I know that Massachusetts has a unique school board structure of some kind that I'm not super well versed in. So adapting that directly to your state is always important, but approaching with structures like the structure from Michigan, New Hampshire has another great set of laws. California has some great set of laws. So approaching with the existing verbiage is a great place to start and really helps you get over that barrier that you may not feel like this is your area of technical expertise.
Yeah, and going off Nate and what he's just stated, using existing verbiage is very important, but you have to just keep in mind that it's not their state, it's not your representative state, so they're not going to care about it nearly as much. They'll use it, they like that inspiration, but I think a key thing you need to be able to show, and there's plenty of resources online, we could help you at SASA too, is a return on investment. When we were at when my team was at Michigan Advocacy Conference recently, we were working on the same bill as always, but one of our questions from our representatives, how does this show return on investment for Michigan? Why should they invest into this? So if you can show, hey, like if you're using the Michigan bill, for example, for your conference or for your state, then if you can find something that shows, hey, as a result of this funding, this happened, then that will really hone in the idea on why your representative should sponsor or support the bill.
And I'll just say, when communicating the bill to other people, really try and understand who your audience is. If you're communicating with a state representative who represents a district that has 50 different robotics programs and are well established, you're going to communicate about the bill very differently than a team communicating to a legislator that has never heard of it before. They are not representing any programs within their district or constituency. And also specifically with the Massachusetts bill, because schools without these existing programs get priority, it's very important to communicate that to any legislators who are representing those districts that would additionally be prioritized and benefit from that priority.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's good to hear that there are a lot of resources from several different places. And that actually segues into the next thing we want to ask is that this isn't something that teams and individuals should work on alone. What is the importance of collaborating with other robotics teams, other robotics organizations that are not affiliated with STEM specific fields? So if that is something you've experienced and you would like to and you would like to speak on that, Archit, if you would like to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so this is kind of pertaining not to the state level, more to our local area. So I'm from Rochester Hills, Michigan, which probably none of you have heard of, but there's a lot of robotics companies in our area. Like Fanuc, their North American headquarters is based in Rochester Hills. So we have three FRC teams in our district, and we really wanted to do something with Fanuc. We've been trying, but when we worked together, all three of our teams, we were able to really get a tour at Fanuc, and we were able to meet with some of their executives in hopes of a sponsorship. So that's kind of the importance of coming together. For example, if you attend the National Advocacy Conference, you have like teams from all over the country that are coming together. We all meet with our legislators on the same day. We met with a chunk of the Hill. And I think if you can work together and do all of that, you'll have a larger impact. And the more legislators that know about your efforts, the more success you'll see in your advocacy.
That was absolutely correct and amazing response. The one thing that I will add is, and this just goes for advocacy in general, not even specific to STEM education or robotics, having a coalition with a defined goal, a shared mission, and is organized and collaborating with each other is always the way to go. This is not necessarily like everyone takes a little chunk. This is everyone is working together at the same time, communicating with each other, figuring out what everyone needs in order to get more co-sponsors for the bill, meet with legislators, make sure this gets on the floor for a vote. Everyone has to be working together, or it's just not going to be set up for success. And on that same note, I think, especially in FRC, there definitely are so many amazing community outreach projects that people are doing. And a lot of teams tend to want to own their project. This is really not one of those cases. This really has to be a collaborative effort. Teams who want this build up, like, basically what I'm trying to say is every single team will benefit from this bill. Every single school district in the state will benefit from this bill. And because of that, it has to be a shared mission. It has to be a shared execution. And I would highly, highly encourage collaboration, not only between, FIRST robotics teams, but also VEX, Science Olympiad, all these other amazing STEM education programs that will also benefit from the passing of this bill.
To add on to that, in terms of the Michigan Advocacy Conference, when there is a giant group of multiple different FIRST teams or VEX or REC teams, it helps create a way for everyone, because we're all like hounding in on them on the same day, so they can't ignore all of us. And there has been seen increases in funding. For us, we advocate for Section 99H under the Michigan state budget, and we have seen increases in funding towards it. Another thing is that even when you're in these meetings, you never know where it's going to take you. Right now, I mentor our middle school FTC team, and that led to us having a follow-up meeting with our representative Jamie Green to trying to get more and more FIRST teams in Macomb County within Michigan. So it's kind of cool to see like where you can go with this when there's a giant group of people, or how you can gain other people into the robotics program.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off of what everyone was touching on, a great coach of mine from robotics, Allison Purdy, always pointed out some like pretty common statement, but high water floats all boats. So advocacy work lifts us all up together. It's not an individual effort. And more importantly, the wider your coalition is, the more people you pull, especially from backgrounds dissimilar to your own. So if you're an urban team, look for rural groups. If you're a rural team, look for urban groups. You're going to get a wider range of representatives and senators, and you're really going to have a broader impact, and you're going to find unlikely champions. That's a big thing we found doing our work, was catching an unlikely champion. We found someone who, from our background as an urban team, we would have never interacted with, but a very rural senator became a huge champion for the work we were doing in Minnesota, and it became an incredible boon. So really broadening the group you bring to the table not only benefits everyone, but it can help pull in different perspectives, different groups, and really strengthen your advocacy effort overall.
So this is a question for everyone. So as exciting as that is to bring more people to the table and get more assistance and widen this effort, how do you get other teams and other individuals interested? Because I know personally, when I was going through robotics, if I had heard an opportunity like this to meet with legislature, I would be hesitant to be involved at first. So for you four, whoever would like to answer first, how would you get someone else interested? What's something you have brought to, whether it's a friend of yours or someone you've met at a competition? What's the best way that you've helped someone get involved?
I'll dive in.
Thank you.
One thing we did really was focus on personal relationships within our state, going to competitions, being in the pit, being excited, talking about what you're doing. It's really easy to get kids to be excited about advocacy. Like Joe said, when he was in high school, if he had heard about this would have been a great thing to get involved. So from a student perspective, talk to your peers. Say, hey, I did this really cool thing. I went to the Massachusetts State House and said, hey, we need more STEM funding, right? So talking to your peers is a great way to approach it. From a mentorship perspective, it's a little more complicated because you really can experience that pushback of, well, it's going to take too long, or it doesn't necessarily directly benefit me. But talk to your fellow mentors, address them, approach those concerns, right? It doesn't necessarily directly benefit you, but it's for the good of all. It lifts us all up. The last thing we did as a team to kind of increase engagement, and we at SASA really like to recommend, is do your local advocacy. Talk to your school board, talk to your city council, talk to whatever structure your school district uses, and then bring that to your other teams, right? Present at competitions, present at off-season events like the one I believe that is happening both at WPI and UConn, right? Talk about your advocacy work, because that will get people excited. All you really have to do is generate interest, because at the end of the day, we're all working towards a very similar goal. We're all very interested in similar things.
All right, kind of going off of what Nate was saying. This year I ran, my team at least ran the Michigan Advocacy Conference, and ways to get people through that is National Advocacy Conference. Now, if they don't know what that is, what we can do is we send out a whole bunch of emails towards other people, but really what I feel like gets people the most is by physically talking to them in person. I know at least for my team, I would go up and I'd be like, "Hey, you should do this because it's kind of cool to like be able to do this because you do have a voice within this government. It may not seem like it all the time, but you do have a voice." And even just going up to people and telling them about personal experiences. We did that at the World Championship this past April to at least get students going to like the National Advocacy Conference. So really, I think the biggest thing about getting people to join advocacy is by talking to them in person, but also giving personal experiences because it is something that is nerve-wracking. But after you go through it, like a time or two, doesn't get it gets easier as time goes on.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Ava said. When we first attended NAC, our team, or the National Advocacy Conference, we really enjoyed it. And I think one of my biggest selling points to other teams, like we would go pit to pit advocating for why people should attend the National Advocacy Conference. And I just said I had fun. And honestly, for a lot of people, they just want to have fun. So if you want to get more people involved, just talk about your experiences. Like, sure, it's cool. We want more funding. That's the ultimate goal. But the first thing I learned from SASA is the ultimate goal of advocacy is forming relationships. And that doesn't have to be with your legislature. That could be with, I don't know, I've met people I've met Ava through advocacy. I've met Ty through advocacy, another person at SASA, met people in New York, New Jersey. So the beauty of advocacy is not only establishing a relationship with your legislature, but also just establishing friendships. And I think just that idea, and if you could say, hey, you can meet more people that honestly have similar opinions to yours, people will do it. And when you have fun, that's just the ultimate gift.
And then finally, I would say, following up to Nate specifically, when trying to sell this to mentors or specific members of teams who may really be like, why is this worth my time? These things take a long time to pass, things like that. My response is, at least speaking from my own personal experience on the team, these teams can be very expensive to run. And I think, especially for public and charter schools, like the Massachusetts school or the Massachusetts bill will benefit, we spend a lot of time and effort fundraising and getting sponsorships, and a lot of effort that could be otherwise headed towards our hardware, software, game design, community outreach, all these other legs that make it run. If this bill were to pass, this would alleviate a lot of the effort that students and mentors combined have to put in just to making sure our teams are financially sound year to year. So in my mind, it's obviously very easy to convince people involved that STEM education advocacy is worth it, but I think this bill specifically is also worth it because it's really cutting out so much of that effort every year that has to be put into working on finances. And then the other thing I will say is, especially for people who may be a little bit more disconnected to your team or really not as like super into the advocacy part, start with something small. Start with, hey, follow us on Instagram or Facebook. sign up for our email distribution to stay updated. Sign up on this physical piece of paper if you want to learn more, things like that. Start with something really small, tangible, something that people can do in like honestly 2 or 3 seconds. But they are interested and want to stay updated. And from there, you can start testing the waters and seeing if they want to give you a testimonial, or if they can provide any sort of insight as a community member, as a parent, as a school district member, whatever role they have. But definitely start with something small, like follow us on social media.
And just one more quick point. Engage with the leadership in your respective organization. Brandy's here. She's a wonderful resource if you're interested in New England as well. The senior mentors from First. There's a ton of people if you're trying to get started or you're trying to engage with teams who can help make that initial connection. That was one thing we really were able to leverage with senior mentorship within Minnesota through the First program, to really connect with teams we wouldn't necessarily know because they have their finger better on the pulse than you may necessarily. So they may know if advocacy efforts are spinning up somewhere else in your state, and you can connect and work together as opposed to kind of having competing interests. Because the last thing you want is one group advocating for one bill, one group advocating for the other, because you're just going to get your legislators crosswise. They're going to be like, and it isn't conducive to making legislative progress in any form.
Amazing. So one of the things that I'm very curious about is it sounds like in talking to a lot of people, you can inspire people in different ways, even unintentionally. So one of the things I'm curious to hear is, has there been anyone that you have accidentally inspired to become involved in advocating for robotics in their state or generally robotics advocacy? Ava, would you like to speak about that first?
Yeah. So for us, when my team, along with our middle school team, I mentioned this briefly earlier, went to the Capitol for meeting with Representative Jamie Green. Originally, we weren't going to be able to meet with her. We didn't think we could, but we tried anyways. Come to our surprise, she was a big, huge fan of robotics, and one thing that sparked her interest was this idea of trying to get as many teams wrapped in and toward the southern part of Macomb County. A little bit about Macomb County is that we have a lot of STEM businesses, but not like a lot of first teams, at least within that county. There's a lot in the northern side of Macomb County, but not a lot throughout the whole one. So that's the one main goal of that. And this sparked Representative Green's interest. And so she was like, I want to have a follow-up meeting with you. And so we had a follow-up meeting with myself and then one of the FTC kids and one of our mentors. And she was like, okay, how can we get businesses? And I liked your idea. How can we get, like, what can I do to help for this? And so now is a part of a school district that doesn't have a robotics team. And she was like, you know what? I want my daughter to be in robotics, and they seem like they're all have like all of her kids have an interest to be able to join my team to take back the knowledge to back to their schools, because it's easier to, like, once you grasp what something is, it's easier to start it up at their own schools. So that's kind of something interesting from meeting.
Yeah, I'll go after Ava here. So this one was actually quite recently. I was at the Michigan Advocacy Conference, and we met with our state representative, Mark Tisdall. And so great meeting with him, talking about robotics and 99H of our state budget. And then the next day, I'm just at school, I'm walking around, I just see him standing there. And so I go and up and talk to him. He actually remembers my name, and we had like a 20-minute conversation about 99H and the importance of robotics. Actually, was able to squeeze in a tour with him of our build space. So you can really just see these guys anywhere. And honestly, the big thing is just showing people, hey, what does robotics mean to you? I know this question is more orienting on how can you get someone into advocacy, and this is more about how can I got my state representative to champion or really support our bill within the Republican caucus. So I think like things like that, but and you could just see them anywhere. And that was a really big shock to me.
Yeah, and to kind of a different approach to accidental advocacy was not necessarily getting we had a representative who we met with during our advocacy conference and we invited back to our build space. And we knew that our representative was a parent. So we were like, bring your sons, like come to our build space with your sons. We'll show you what's going on. We'll kind of get you excited. And I think that was a great way to also build a champion. Like we had someone who was interested in education and pro it, but she wasn't willing to be a champion yet. And we brought her to the build space. We said, look at our robot, and her boys got really engaged and excited, and they got the bug. So that was a great kind of jump off point for us. So looking for those ways to make those incidental connections is a great way to do it. That is an important reminder, just like at competition, whenever you're wearing your team gear, you represent your team. So you could bump into a team in an elevator at a hockey game. You could you could run into someone anywhere. So making sure you're representing your team well and really passionate is a great way to make these accidental connections because you can't plan for them.
Those are some really cool stories. It's always fun to me to hear how people have gotten involved in organizations like this and just generally how people get excited. So for anyone who has joined recently, thank you so much for joining today. If you have any questions for our panelists, please send them in the chat and use the raise hand function in Zoom. I will allow you to ask your question and have the panelists respond to you all. Outside of that, we're going to continue on with some questions for our panelists. So we've been speaking a lot about legislators and communicating with them. What's something you can do outside of your advocacy day to help garner positive relationships with them and then continue to stay connected with them once a connection has been formed? Olivia, is this something that you'd like to speak on?
Yeah, definitely. So something about politics in general, but I think also if you're working with one person specifically, something that is very helpful is having one point of contact, maybe two. But representatives, senators, all of them are very busy people. And chances are their staff members are the one managing their email, and it is much easier if they know to go to one or two established people for all communication with a specific team on a specific bill or project, rather than have a group of 50 people who are emailing them all kind of connected but also not. So just make sure you stay organized for your own sake and for their sake. It is a lot less confusing if you are going through one or two people. And that doesn't mean that those people have to be leads in any way, shape, or form. It really just means they're the ones sending the email. But it should be a large group effort. But yeah, just as far as organization, I think that's definitely helpful. And then just being out there, going to community events, posting about on social media, continuing to email not only your own legislators, but also really staying organized with the coalition building advocacy project that's taking place across the state, staying connected with other teams and programs and figuring out what they are doing. What can you be doing? How can you help others accomplish their goals? Writing to your local newspaper, collecting testimonials from students, mentors, parents, community members on why this bill matters to them. These are all things that you can be doing outside of your designated advocacy day, and you really should be doing in order to keep the flame alive.
Yeah, and going after Olivia here and the whole idea of one point of contact is really important thing. I know for our team, we met with our state senator and our state representative, Michigan Advocacy Conference. So we just had one student keep in contact with one of the offices and another student. So that way everyone can get the experience, but you're keeping the idea of one point of contact. But just a tip. So after you meet with your representative, send a follow-up email, a thank you email. Those are very important. But on top of that, I've seen a lot of success sending a physical piece of mail, like a physical thank you note, because that's a step further. I know with us, when we did that, we were able to really establish a relationship with especially Mark Tisdale. And in fact, he came to our FTC comp we hosted a couple weeks ago because he really liked robotics. So that honestly helps develop the relationship. And then you could focus on getting bills passed after that. So that's my big recommendation for that.
Yeah, and Olivia definitely can speak probably more to the other side of this, but there is a level of, these are your representatives, these are your legislators. Invite them to your build space, invite them to your competitions, invite them to, if you're doing an interesting community event, or invite them. They'll come, and especially at the state level, because very often these are people coming from your own communities. Their parents, their grandparents, they're just people involved in the community. Olivia can probably speak to it better, but keep the communication tasteful. Don't be emailing them about everything. Don't be emailing them all the time. Send a follow-up email after your meeting, and then send, a month out before your competition. Say, hey, keep it professional, but keep them engaged. The last thing there too, as well, is if you're in your community, if you're involved, if you're a presence in your community, then advocacy also can kind of naturally occur. If the legislatures are from your community, they're going to see you out, they're going to see you involved, whether that's at school events so there's both sides. Be intentional about it, but also your community presence is another tool in your advocacy toolkit.
And I guess to close out, just speaking not only from my advocacy work, but also on the other end, because I have worked in the offices of some of these people, there is so much happening. There are so many issues happening that are related to education, also a million other issues in Massachusetts and America and the world in general that people are working on. Make it memorable. Not only do you need to be, consistent with how often you are reaching out or meeting with these people, make sure that every time you are actually meeting with people, it is meaningful, it is memorable, it's something that they're not going to forget after a week. So hand them the remote control to your robot. That's what we did with our state representative, and he loved it. They absolutely loved that experience. That's fun, engaging, exciting, gets their hands on, and something that they're not going to forget after a week. But yeah, just maintain a level of not only quantity of reaching out to them to make sure, you're staying posted, but also make sure that every interaction has some sort of meaning, make sure it's memorable, all that. And yeah, that's the best advice I can give. Just stay consistent.
Thank you all. That it's very exciting to hear that that is how we can move forward with this. And so actually bouncing off of one of the things you mentioned at the end, Olivia, I think this is a question directed for Nate, but has anyone addressed like specifically through legislative advocacy funding for robotics or STEM education in a classroom and helping educators overcome the hurdle of teaching something they're unfamiliar with?
So that is definitely a challenge, right? Finding teachers and mentors who are excited and knowledgeable, especially excited, can be quite the battle. I don't know if there's been a direct legislative approach or tool, but one thing to remember is expanding these funds helps lower the barrier to entry, lower risk. So Michigan is a great example of a state that through their bill, you can receive coaches stipends, right? So if the funding is there, it's a really great tool to help people kind of overcome that trepidation. Outside of that, again, there's no direct legislative approach, but by expanding access to funding, especially for schools that come from less affluent backgrounds, is a great way to kind of tackle that, right? If there's funding on the table and teams know that the risk to their community, to their team, to however they fundraise is lower, it's going to really lower that kind of trepidation and lower the stakes a lot. So it's important to remember, right? Expanding access to these tools not only helps established teams, but it helps new teams take that first leap, right? If you know that your first competition fees are covered, you're first of all, your fundraising, the bear that is fundraising for a robotics team is immediately cut down. If you know your kit's covered, you know that you have a solid ground, right? If you know these things exist and these structures and tools exist, it's going to be much more approachable, much more accessible, especially for those with a non-technical background.
That's exciting to hear that there are opportunities like that to encourage new educators, especially with something like this. And so that obviously, at least to me, seems like it can uh, bring some setbacks and some challenges with encouraging people and getting people like fully excited to be involved in advocacy and continue to be a major supporter. In your experiences, what are some, or rather, have you had any setbacks that you've really had to learn from, build upon, and grow forward from? And can you share those experiences? Arjun, if you'd like to go first.
I mean, in terms of specific stories, I don't really have much. It's more just a general thing regarding nerves and just reaching out. I mean, I think for me, the most annoying part in advocacy is scheduling meetings with legislatures. Oftentimes, you might get ignored. You might get like a cryptic email back, but you just kind of have to keep going at it. So, like 2 years ago, when our team first attended the Michigan Advocacy Conference, I reached out to once again Mark Tisdall, our state representative, for a meeting, and I got completely ghosted by his office. And it was kind of tough to think about that because now we have such a good relationship with him. But like I kept emailing him, I kept updating his office about what our team has done and things like that. So you kind of just don't give up. They really do care about you, especially considering most of you are constituents to your legislatures you are meeting with, and that will really help you. So just don't give up is my biggest tip for that.
Ava, if you'd like to speak next.
Yeah, so this isn't really a personal story of mine. This is just from another team in Michigan. But in I believe it was during the National Advocacy Conference, NAC, they were really worried about one of their legislators that they were going to talk to because they were like, "Oh no, this guy probably isn't going to support robotics at all." Comes to find out after they did their meeting, they were like, "That actually went surprisingly well." It I feel like most of this comes from us like having a voice as like such a young person because like you can listen to like they'll listen to anyone, but I feel like there's also this where like if you're sharing your personal stories of how it is directly affecting you because you're a part of this program, I feel like that is a way to help like overcome this. So that team, they were able to get support for the bills that we were trying to have like advocate for, and overall, I think that's a very cool thing.
And Olivia, if you'd like to speak on this too.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there were a couple of things that were, I would say, setbacks when really trying to, I would say, pioneer this in the state of Massachusetts. Number one, the legislative, I don't know what you would call it. The legislative cycle is very weird, especially to like people who don't real aren't super involved in politics. It can be really confusing, but basically, there are certain times of year where not a lot is happening at all in your state legislature, and there's certain times of year where there is so much happening in your state legislature. So that may not necessarily line up with what like the timeline of when your team has a lot of bandwidth to be working on this. Um, for example, the legislative season will start in January for Massachusetts, and I think most legislatures across the country. That also lines up perfectly when build season starts. So it's a very busy time of year for everyone. But just understanding, maintaining those relationships, really pushing for your advocacy at those times of year where legislators are really looking to push their legislation is important. I would also say, and that just the only setback that really is just sometimes the timelines don't line up. Sometimes you're really going, like, your busiest time of year for building your robot is also going to be the busiest time of year for you to push your bill. The other setback I think would be, I not personally, but I think there were a couple times where we received some negative feedback about the bill from people participating in these types of programs who either really didn't understand the purpose, the writing of the bill, or were just plainly upset that certain districts or counties were favored compared to others. And just honestly, to combat that, we just say we have put in the research. We really have, it has shown that these counties are not participating in these STEM education programs compared to every other district or county in Massachusetts. And we made an intentional choice with the state representative, who also agreed and thought this would be a very good idea, to include that language saying that these counties will be the first to benefit. So at the end of the day, if people disagree with that, there's nothing you can really do about it. But just understanding, having a deep understanding of the bill that you're advocating for and being able to communicate kind of the reasoning and intention behind it properly, I think is one way to kind of get over that setback.
And just to kind of close this question out, we've ran the national advocacy here at SASA for 11 years. Every year, something's going to go wrong, whether it's coordinating teams, whether it's coordinating approaches, whether it's, last year it was me on emails, whatever happens, whatever breakdown happens, you're going to be able to overcome it. It's a good learning lesson. Just make sure you keep that information institutional to the best of your knowledge, like learn from those lessons, take them forward, whether it's a meeting that doesn't go well, or it's verbiage in a bill that seems to be favoring some regions and it's not clear to teams why it's justified. Just make sure you're learning from these lessons. No one's going to be perfect. No one's going to do it flawlessly every time. Start off with a solid approach, keep taking steps and moving forward, and you'll find a healthy amount of progress as you move through this stuff. It is, we've all learned how to do it. We've all grown into doing it. There's no magic. It just takes a little bit of effort.
Awesome. And one last question before we head into our break is, a lot of this sounds really nerve-wracking. How do you overcome those nerves? And a lot of you have said that it's through experience and generally just meeting with people, but what are things you've done to help yourself feel a bit more relaxed?
Okay.
Arjit, if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, I'll go for this. So I would say see if you can go with someone more experienced. Oftentimes, if you have someone to look up to, it'll really help you ease your nerves because if something goes horribly wrong, you could fall back with someone who has more experience. But also, just take a deep breath. That really has helped me in the past. If you're really feeling down, just get out a piece of paper and just vent out all your feelings. That also has helped me. So, I mean, these are little tricks to help just calm your mind, relax, take a deep breath. It's gonna go okay. Worst case worst, they say no to your bill, which I really doubt. I've never seen something like that. So it's gonna be okay. You're gonna have fun and just look at it as a learning experience. That's the best way to look at it. Don't look at it as, if I don't get this bill passed, I'm a horrible advocate. It's not like that. Just look at it as a learning experience. This is something new for most of you. And it's honestly very fun. So just take a deep breath, relax, it'll all be okay.
Ava, if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, so kind of bouncing off of Arjit, having that person who is more experienced in a meeting is very helpful. But even if you can't, just write out everything that you want to say. I would suggest using bullet points because you'll be more focused on content versus words. For me personally, I normally get very anxious whenever it comes to like presenting in front of someone, even if I know the material. But if you know what you're talking about and you know that this is something that you are passionate about, that honestly makes it a lot easier. And maybe this is just me, but I feel like once you start talking, it's almost hard to stop in the sense of it's all your nerves, they just kind of go away and all that nervous energy. If you channel it into excitement, it's basically the same thing. Um, but if you channel into excitement and you show that energy in your meetings, it will be very helpful for you in order to calm down your nerves. I know it's sometimes easier said than done, but going off of me, I feel like trying to channel it into something that I know I can do this, and it's something I'm very passionate about, I feel like will help you with nerves very much.
Olivia, if there's anything you'd like to add as well.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, obviously, just practice, practice, practice. This goes for pretty much anything. Definitely take the time to, I would even say, do like a mock run through, just to understand, your presentation, what exactly you're going to be saying, get the feel for what this conversation is going to look like. Definitely practice. I'll also say it is totally great to have a piece of paper. This is not like a speech that you need to memorize, nothing like that. It's actually fit. I actually would recommend bringing some sort of infographic, some sort of professional looking paper for them to have for after you even leave their office. But it is absolutely okay to not have stuff memorized. They're not expecting that, and frankly, no one is doing that when they come. And believe me, like there are so many people coming into the office every day for different advocacy projects, and none of them are memorized. It's all like they've all put in the work and practice, but it's not like they're standing up there giving a presidential speech. I would also say it's not personal. If it turns out that the legislator does not want to co-sponsor the bill, they can't support it for whatever reason, after you've just kind of poured your heart and soul out to them, it is important to remember that it is not personal. A lot of legislators are making the decisions that they make for unknown reasons to us. That's like the certain degree of politics that goes on in different states and for different legislators. It really is not personal. It's not personal to your team. It's not personal to you as a member. It really just is sometimes the decisions that these legislators have to make, either because of their party or because of some other reason that they may not be willing to share. But they always 100% of the time appreciate the time that you give them. They want to hear from you, and especially as students, it is honestly sad how little time that these legislators get to spend with teenagers, with children, with people, just generally young people in their district. Most of the time, the advocacy projects that come through the office are adults coming through. But it is really special to have young people in the office to speak directly with their legislators. So please do not be swayed. If you can't get it passed for whatever reason, it is not personal. But yeah, that would be my biggest advice going forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. We're now going to take a short break. We will be back promptly at 11:15. If you have any questions, please send them in the chat and we will get them prepared for our presenters. Otherwise, we will see you back here in a little more than 10 minutes. Thank you all very much so far. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. It's 11:16, and we're going to get right back into our questions. I'm going to double check and see if we've had any in the chat since we've been. Actually, Nick or Jamie, if there have been any questions since the break we took, I had to restart Zoom for myself and I've lost any of the questions that were in chat. So if there were any, please forward them to me. But for now, I think we're going to get started with some more questions for our panelists. So first, one of the things that we touched on briefly earlier was collaboration between teams, and not just teams, but organizations, because there are multiple robotics and STEM-based organizations in New England and around the US and around the world that can and should work together. Nate, if you'd like to talk a little bit about why it's important for FIRST and VEX and REC and other organizations like this to communicate and work together to ensure that, as well as FTC, FLL, and just generally organizations like this to work together to ensure this advocacy is touched upon and explored.
Yeah, I think it's very important, right? Our program, VEX and FIRST, may seem like disparate things or not engaged, but we really are connected, right? Our missions, our approaches, our goals, everything involved with both programs is the same, right? We want to see more kids engaged in STEM engagement activities. We want to see more kids excited and empowered in their education to work on the hands-on stuff. And on top of that, right, like the collaboration is really what builds us up stronger. If you approach your legislators as a FIRST only or VEX only approach, you can sometimes really get pushback from like, well, why are we, funneling money straight into one program? Why are we not expanding opportunities as wide as they come? Outside of that, for anyone involved in FRC, we know how expensive that program can be. We know that across the board, all of these competition programs provide different means of access to education. And with more programs that have more accessibility to funding, we're going to get more students engaged, right? VEX fits some programs better than some of the FIRST programs fit some schools, right? So we want to give schools the opportunity to engage with VEX, with BEST, with these other competitions, with Science Olympiad, with all of these other opportunities to engage with students, because at the end of the day, right, we're not doing this for our teams, we're not doing this for our programs, we're doing this for education opportunities for students. And that will look different depending on a community and school's needs and capabilities. So by preventing that kind of pigeonholing into one program or one vehicle or one specific area, you can really help lift up everyone, right? A rural community is going to have very different needs than an urban community. Affluent community is going to have very different needs than a less affluent community. We don't want to force teams into programs that don't fit their mold. And we want to ensure that every team has an opportunity to, every team, every student, every community has the opportunity to participate in STEM education in whatever form is most accessible and most helpful to them.
Ava, would you like to speak next on this?
Yeah, so in terms of making sure that everyone stays together, this can even go as far as the FTC teams, for FIRST at least. In Michigan, our FTC is through middle school, and while even though that it may not seem like they can be wrapped into this, they can be, because in other states, and I guess also in other countries, it goes for all ages, and everyone can be benefited by working together. So for us, wrapping in our middle school team with our advocacy efforts, it's helping them also benefit, because for us, all coming together to work towards 99H, that's for all competitive robotics teams in Michigan, not just FIRST teams, not just one little group. It's for all teams, and making sure that we are all together in this to make a difference is still very important.
And Olivia, if there's anything you'd like to add to this as well, please do.
Absolutely. So I think it's super important to build your coalition across different programs and also different ages. Like Ava was just mentioning with FTC and FRC with like the different age categories. Legislators, if we're proposing a bill that's going to provide funding for elementary and secondary schools, they want to know that this is wanted from both elementary and secondary schools. So it's important to have a broad coalition of students of all ages, mentors who are mentoring teams of all ages, and them also to give their experience. Even to have like the 4 and 5-year-olds say, I really love FLL, I really love robotics. Because at the end of the day, and this is something also I think we explicitly included in the Massachusetts bill, legislators are interested in this because they want, like, essentially young people are the future of the state, and the future of the state is going to be STEM focused. So they want to know that these programs are going to keep students in STEM, like engaged with STEM. They want to know that these students are going to be interested in staying in the state, filling jobs in STEM that are like desperately needed to be filled right now. And they need to know that if they are going to give us this grant program, that money is going to be well spent from elementary school to high school and beyond. They are going to get that return on investment that RJ was talking about. And I guess from that other perspective of, I am very aware teams are a little bit territorial over their advocacy. If legislators can sense that your advocacy is not mutually beneficial, and they will sense that if it's not communicated and you're not working together with people, they will be turned off. This is the same, for example, if Coca-Cola and Pepsi both agreed that they wanted to find a new invention to get rid of all of their cans and things like that. They both agree on that, but Coca-Cola goes ahead and files a bill that says, we want to fund a research program for just Coke products. That does not make any sense. And they need to include Pepsi in that work, or at the end of the day, the recycling or like new invention to get rid of cans is not going to happen without Pepsi. So it's just really the same thing. This is not about a organization. It's not about a company. This is about STEM education. And all of these different programs obviously will benefit and fall under that. But at the end of the day, this is really not us going to say, give First Robotics money, give Vex Robotics money. This is not it. This is really about that common good.
Yeah, and just to very quickly touch on the point Olivia made, right there within your district, I will bet a decent chunk of money that there are multiple STEM education programs like Science Olympiad, like First, like Vex, like. So your legislator represents these people as constituents as well, right? Legislators aren't going to generally act in ways that go against or are detrimental to their constituents. Outside of that, it's also important to pull in teams from your area, especially First, FLL, FTC. FLL is a little young. First is my background. So pull in that chain up, right? Because FTC is an important program. And it was what inspired me to get involved in STEM, right? It has an impact and it feeds directly up the pipeline. So look in your community. If you're going out as a FTC team or an FRC team or a VEX team or whatever program you're coming from, look in your community. See if there's community teams, if there's teams from private schools, if there's teams at different high schools, right? Bring them involved, bring them into the fold, because their message, their advocacy work is just as important as yours. And you can only tell your own story, right? So bringing a wider range of programs, a wider range of students with more diverse backgrounds from different programs is only going to strengthen the platform that STEM, like the STEM education platform we're trying to work towards, right? So ensure that you're including students. It also, for advocacy efforts, helps if you get them involved in middle school and then they stay involved through high school. They're going to become better advocates. They're going to become better teachers. They're going to become better leaders within your community and team and make advocacy easier. Right. So the wider the range of students you can get involved in, the easier advocacy actually becomes. Right. Just a quick touch point. One of the most impactful advocacy stories I've ever had came from a quiet student who I didn't know, who had no background like mine, but her message really resonated with me and connected with my message, but it came from a different perspective. Right. So when we both share our stories and they build towards the same goal, it's only strengthening our platforms.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting to see that there is this very positive air on collaboration and ensuring that this is a education advocacy rather than a specific robotics foundation advocacy. So next question is a question for Olivia. You've talked a bunch about gathering data for assisting with the bill and law process in Massachusetts. How did you go about that? And could you talk a little bit about the process of gathering information that allowed you to approach this?
Absolutely. I'm very fortunate to be a member, or in high school, I was a member of FRC 4905 and Draw 101. We had already had a long campaign called the Fast the Mass First initiative, which aims to get a first robotics team in every single school district in the state of Massachusetts. And through that, we had already done a lot of research on where first robotics teams are located. Specifically looking at public school districts, seeing, honestly, just even using the First Robotics website, because they also do have accurate and up-to-date information as to where teams are located. Just, really mapping out the state of Massachusetts, getting a list of all of the 351 towns, looking at where are not only like how many or if there are any teams in each town, but where are these towns located? And we started to find patterns that there were a lot of teams really densely located in certain areas, also happened to be more affluent areas of Massachusetts versus other areas of Massachusetts where there were really miles and miles and miles of towns where there was really nothing there happening. And through that research, we started and have been continuing to reach out specifically to their principals of the schools, local libraries, just really anyone we could find that would be could speak on behalf of this a school or a district, trying to understand, are you interested in this? What has stopped you from this? And a lot of the time it really just is finance. People just can't get through the door with the finance. And so that is really that research and that talking to people one-on-one who have not been able to benefit from these STEM education programs really was the reason why I wanted to write and file this bill, because it was just becoming more abundantly clear that it wasn't that people weren't interested. It was that it was funding that was a problem for school districts to get their foot in the door into any of these programs.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that experience. It's really cool to see that you were able to go through the process of understanding what access was and then had an approach to helping change that. So moving forward is actually kind of bouncing off this idea of you working on something for so long and being part of a process of developing it for so long. Can the panelists all speak on what the feeling is like of working on something throughout your high school career, potentially a college career, of something you might not see come to fruition while you're working on it? So if you are a student in high school working on a bill like Olivia, what is that like once you've graduated high school and no longer have the opportunity to continue working on it? Nate, if you'd like to go first.
So one of the things that actually inspired me to get involved in advocacy was my previous teammates' work in Minnesota, right? I was the beneficiary of those who came before me. They worked really hard to get funding for competitive robotics practice fields across the state. So I was able to, as a team that had never had a full-size practice field, have access to a full-size practice field. And that really changed my understanding of this perspective, right? Yeah, you're working on things that you will never directly experience the beneficial outcome, right? STEM education is good for all of us across the board. So in some way, working in STEM education is going to benefit you at some point in your lifetime through the work you do. But you may not experience the direct result, right? And there is something that's kind of disheartening about that, right? You're like, why am I putting in all this effort to get, like, in a selfish sense, no reward for myself? But at the end of the day, you have to remember and kind of be inspired by the fact that you're helping pave the way for the generations that are coming after you. And what I really helped centered me and get me to focus and drive through this was like, why would I want those coming through the program after me to experience the same challenges and setbacks that we had to work through ourselves, right? My teammates who worked across the state of Minnesota to get practice fields knew what it was like to not have a full-size practice field to test their robot. Right? I knew as a student in Minnesota what it was like to struggle to retain mentorship because of funding, or to work with teams that could not afford their kit bots and had to scrounge stuff up, right? So what really inspires me is looking at it and realizing, like, why don't I help work to remove the barriers that made my life difficult? And the engineer in me is like, well, why don't, like, let's solve these problems now because they shouldn't be problems, right? So looking at that, approaching that from the perspective of like, let's make it easier for people to go through the programs without the challenges we faced, is a great way to kind of center yourself and ground yourself as you approach these challenges.
Arjit, if you'd like to go next.
Yeah, I'd like to follow Nate there. Nate nailed most of the points I was going to cover, but a big idea is the way I look at it is it'll help sustain the program. For me, the first program and robotics in general has given me a lot. It's changed who I am, and I want everyone to have access to that. So without this funding, a lot of teams wouldn't be able to start. I know on our team, we mentor and manage the finances for all the middle school and elementary school teams in our district. And with that, we know the importance of 99H funds under the Michigan State budget. And knowing that maybe hundreds or thousands of students would lose access to STEM and not be able to participate in FIRST or VEX as a result of that funding not being there, really it really affects me. And that's kind of my drive. I don't really care that it doesn't like give me money directly. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to create more opportunities and then ensure that everyone has access to the benefits the FIRST program offers. It also ensure that the FIRST program can continue expanding and ensure its sustainability in the long run.
Awesome. Thank you, Arjit. And last, Olivia, if you'd like to touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what both of them said, but I absolutely agree with what they both said. I also just think, for me, this process was a life-changing experience. Even though I had to, I had to, but I also wanted to pass this off to the students after me, who are, and it's still being passed on to more and more students who come through FRC 4905, and obviously the statewide advocacy project it has now become. But I guess what helped me feel comfortable kind of giving that up and like being okay with not necessarily getting it past like the first legislative season that we filed it is knowing that there were so many eager students and mentors to keep working on this after I graduated. So this kind of goes back into why it's so important to build a large coalition, not only like across the state, but also within your own team with like younger members and older members. Is I was so happy and excited that there were so many students and mentors who, after I graduated in 2021, were like, this is awesome. We're going to keep working on this. You can be involved in whatever capacity you'd like to be. We understand that you're a college student, things like that. But also there are so many kids on the team who want to keep doing this work. And I felt super excited, comfortable. I knew that these people, like all of the team members, were trained. They knew what they were doing. They had the connections, they were organized, all that. So I felt very comfortable kind of letting go once I graduated. But I would also just say, from a higher level perspective, advocacy is a selfless act. Obviously, we will all benefit from the bill passing, but at the end of the day, this really is we are advocating a lot of the time on behalf of children or school districts that just do not have the resources to run these programs and need a voice from people like super into it, who can speak on behalf of what works about FIRST and VEX and Science Olympiad. It just is a selfless act, and you may not be able to see the bill pass, but it has to start sometime or else it's never going to start. So as long as you have a wide coalition that's well versed, you feel comfortable leaving it off to, I felt absolutely fine and excited, honestly, to graduate and see what the team did next with it.
And to round out this question, Ava, if there's anything you'd like to add as well.
Yeah, so just kind of repeating information that was already said. All of those are very great points. But for me personally, I know that there were people who started paving this way on my team, at least before I even got onto the team. And I think that part of the reason why I'm here on this panel is because people were able to teach me in order to be here. I think then from there is making sure that this goes down, even though I won't be a part of the team in like 2 years because I'll be graduated. I think that me being able to help the younger generations or the younger kids to get to the point where I am, that is something I think is extraordinary because it's happened with me. So why can't I do that for someone else, even if it doesn't affect me?
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for all sharing your experience with this. This is a really important thing. So a lot of you have talked about specifically getting information into bills. And so this is a question for Olivia and Nate. Can you both speak about what the timeline is like of getting a bill passed in your state and what that process is like?
I'll jump in first because Olivia probably has much better understanding of the actual mechanics of the process. But for me, as someone who did advocacy work in Minnesota when the bill was passed in 2021 after, no, 2019 after our team had worked on it for about 5 years. The advocacy work our team had been going on for approximately 8. So there's a few layers here, right? There's actual bill, like verbiage, getting to the House, getting in Minnesota House and Senate, getting through, and then there's the groundwork, right? And the groundwork in Minnesota took a few years because we had a shifting political landscape. We had changing STEM champions. So that's a legislator who's really adopted and driving the cause forward, and you need that generally. So it took us from written down to inception 4 to 5 years. Along the way through our STEM champions, we had also worked on adding language to bills to expand some discretionary funding for STEM programs, to expand, some other things. So an actual bill can be a hefty undertaking, but it's very achievable. But while you're working towards it, you're going to be involved in writing the other parts, working with legislators, becoming a resource, right? So it's 4 to 5 years is what it took us. The whole other side of advocacy is sometimes the stars don't align, right? Maybe you have a very contested House and Senate. Maybe you have a politically non-favorable governor for your platform. So sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? And that's part of why it can take so long. So some teams may just slip right through, right? And some other teams may take the work. But that's why laying the groundwork and putting in that time and putting in those hours is rewarding. And that's why it's so necessary. Is because you never know when the stars are going to align to really make your job easier. So you always want to be ready to strike. And by working year after year, you could sometimes get through. I mean, in Minnesota, what we saw was a fairly contested budget discussion the year our bill got passed. But what really worked out well was the work we had done had helped us cross the aisle. So we weren't used necessarily as a trading card in the budgetary discussion. It was generally understood that this was a relatively small expenditure that would be very beneficial to the state. So it takes a while, but making sure you're ready and working and putting in the work now, right? It's like I come from a traditional sports background. Practice how you play. Start working hard now. Start putting in your knocks now, putting in your time, getting better as an advocate is only going to make it easier when the timing is right.
And Olivia, if you'd like to add to this as well, please do.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the beauty of the US is every state is different. Every state has a different timeline. Every state has a different legislative structure. I can speak on behalf of Massachusetts. We have a biennial cycle, which means that we basically start from scratch every 2 years. So not only do all of our state representatives are up for re-election every 2 years, but also pretty much all of the bills are scrapped and have to be refiled if you would like to refile them. And also new bills can be added during what will become this upcoming one will be starting in January 2024. So actually coming up very soon. So in that time period, we will most likely see the actual bill numbers change because it's kind of somewhat of a random process. You have to refile the bill and they'll give you a new number. I know when we first filed this in 2020, the bill was H700. Now it's H557. We're probably going to see that number change again when it gets refiled in 2024. Then in Massachusetts, once that gets approved, it heads over to the Committee on Education, who deals with all filed bills related to education. Obviously, ours is. And we've had a lot of amazing opportunities to speak directly and advocate directly with that entire committee to talk about why this is so important. Also, during the beginning of 2024, I think is the correct and right time to be ramping up the advocacy on social media, in the press, doing anything that you want. I will say bills sometimes take 10, 15 years to pass. And that's just an unfortunate reality, is that it's a slow process, but that is intentional in every state and the entire US government. It is a slow but intentionally slow process because they want to make sure that the final product is the best it can possibly be, and is researched, well thought through, and obviously passes through the legislature and people actually want it. So I would say, as far as getting things done as quickly as possible, contrary to popular belief, legislatures are way more likely to bring up a topic or focus on something when the general public is talking about it. A lot of times we feel like our politicians are the ones setting the agenda, but in my experience, it's actually been somewhat of the opposite, where it's like, if constituents are really interested in this one specific thing that the actual representative may not be interested in, they will pivot their efforts to make sure that they are, listening to, informed about what their constituents are caring about. So basically, all this is me trying to say, if we can get as much advocacy together, if we can organize as much as possible, if we can post about this on social media as much as possible, host events, collect testimonials, do as much as possible to get this out into the world, they are much more likely to think about it. They're much more likely to look at the bill, which is one of most likely over 6,000 bills that will be filed, because that is typical. The more likely it is to get looked at in the committee, it's more likely to pass all these things. And the reason why it has taken this long thus far, honestly, when we filed this in 2020, COVID was everything, to be honest. So really all that was being looked at in the Committee on Education was related to COVID response in public and charter schools, which makes sense. I think going forward, if we can make this a statewide, like, huge advocacy thing where we're engaging a large amount of senators, representatives, all of that, we can make this something that, obviously not as big as COVID was, but like something big that's being talked about across the state, in newspapers, in media, all these things that, it's not just FIRST Robotics and Vex Robotics people hearing about it, it's everyone is hearing about it.
Great. So our next question has to do with the people involved. And from what it sounds like, and from 4 different people who are in very different parts of their educational and professional careers, why are students doing this? And why should students be the one leading this rather than mentors? Ava, if you'd like to talk about this.
Yeah, so the reason why students are doing this as opposed to mentors is because students are the one who have the most power here. And I mean this in the sense of, students are the ones who are going through this experience. Yes, mentors are as well, but students are the ones that are directly gaining as much as they can from this program. This could then go from where they go on beyond high school or beyond their school education, is because they're the ones that are going through this, and also they have a say in the government. It may not seem like it, but they do have it, and it is kind of hard to grasp that when you are a minor. and that's just how it is. But that's why we have our students go and advocate as opposed to our mentors.
Awesome. Is there anyone else who would like to jump in and add to this? But otherwise, we can go right to our next question.
I can quickly add just as a legislator, working with kids and young people in your district is also really popular for them. It's a great way for them as legislators to connect with their community. First of all, they want to hear from you, but secondly, there is actually a political advantage for them that they are looking for working with young people. And that's not to say that the only reason that they're meeting with you is for political reasons, because that's not true, but they do actually want to meet with you. But it also is helpful for them to be working with children and understanding what is the lived experience of young people in their district.
Thank you very much. It's exciting to see that this is focusing on the young people who will hopefully be affected by this someday. And so the next question comes for people who have done research in a wide area. Have any of the advocates on the panel researched towns or locations that once had a team that no longer has it or has fewer teams? And what was the root cause of that decline in teams? Arjun, if you'd like to speak on that quickly.
Yeah, so honestly, I had mentioned this earlier in the panel. I come from a town with a lot of robotics companies. So we have a lot of interest in robotics teams from our youth. A big problem we have faced, though, is lack of mentors. And during COVID, we lost a lot of mentors and a lot of teams had to shut down. I'm sure many other locations experienced similar trends. I haven't really researched too much outside of my local area, but a way we address this lack of mentorship, and we're kind of bouncing back up within the past 2 years, is we met with our mayor and we got public support. Our mayor had a proclamation on why robotics programs are great. And I think that really inspired a lot of adults. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to work in engineering. You can work in a business management or consulting. Anyone can help with robotics. And a lot of adults took inspiration from that. And then our team, we help manage some of the finances for new teams that start. So that also eased the stress from a lot of other teams that wanted to start robotics. So to summarize your question, a big reason for that was lack of mentorship, and we addressed it via advocacy to our mayor.
Amazing. Well, it's very exciting to see that, or it's good to see that there is an understanding as to what's going on, as well as general spread of information. And so I think we have time for one last question. And so this question comes from the chat as well. And so the question is, are there any forms of advocacy that you would advise against due to unprecedented complications, especially for teams that are newer to advocacy? And Arjun, if you'd like to speak briefly about this first, and anyone else can jump in afterwards, but I think we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really anything I would say don't advocate. Like, just leave politics out of it. I think that's very important. Don't ever mention party. Don't ever mention things like that, especially in meetings. But also keep in mind the event that you are doing this. If you're inviting them to like a parade, you don't need to talk about STEM funding and bills. Just have a good time. I mean, forming that relationship is one of the most important parts of advocacy. You can get more deep into builds when you do a formal meeting later on, but keep in mind your environment and the relationship you have with your legislators and the person you're trying to meet with. That's my biggest recommendation for that.
And Nate, if you'd like to wrap us up for questions.
I think Arjit hit the nail on the head. This is just like a mechanics of a meeting thing that we mentioned in the resources on the Sneak website. But the two really things you want to avoid are being against stuff. Like, as a STEM education platform, bring your piece in, say why it's important to you. You may get pushback of, well, is this money going to fund? That's not your responsibility. That is not your scope. You're not going to be pulling from state Medicare, Medicaid. You're not going to be altering how stuff flows, right? Just talk about what you're passionate about. And then the other one that is very important to remember is do not discuss election, re-election, anything about campaigning when meeting with them in an official capacity in their office. That is a faux pas, and I'm fairly confident probably against the law in some states. but don't enter that realm of talking about, re-election or anything. It's not polite. It's not what they're working on when you're meeting with them in that capacity. And it also is just going to derail and change the entire kind of energy in the conversation.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much to all of our panelists. You all have given us some incredible advice today and some incredible ideas of how we can all go forward. We can help teach people and generally improve robotics education in our state. And now, before we hand it over to Brandy, I want to just give our panelists a quick few seconds to give some final comments to everyone here. So, Arjit, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Just last thing I want to say is keep in mind this is not like something like, oh, hey, I need to focus on getting this bill passed. Honestly, my biggest recommendation is networking. If you go to the National Advocacy Conference, we randomize the seating so that way everyone sits with someone new. If you're at one of the in-person events and you don't know someone, go talk to them, get their number, get their email, stay in contact. These connections are really important. And honestly, I think that's a bigger benefit from advocacy rather than just the direct benefit of passing a bill.
Ava?
Yeah, completely agree with Arjit, but just to reiterate some information, when you go into your meetings, it's easier said than done, but don't stress too hard about it. If the worst that they can say is no, however, that's most likely not going to happen if they see how passionate you are for the program that you're advocating for. Just make sure that you go in there with a positive attitude. Don't look like miserable when you're in there, but if you have that energy and you show how passionate you are, make sure that gets displayed. Share your personal stories or share how this program will affect you if this bill or whatever you're advocating for gets passed. It does help, and it will.
Olivia?
My biggest piece of advice is make it memorable. As someone who's been on the other side of this, we get thousands of people coming to the office every single year advocating for different bills or funding processes. But at the end of the day, the ones that get passed are the ones that the senator or representative remembers and is deeply affected by. This is not to say you need to share your whole life story, but really do make it clear that how much you as a person, your school, your community has benefited from these programs, and also make it exciting. Bring them to fun events, have them test out your robot, have them participate in the fun aspects of your team, and that will be memorable for them, and that's the right way to go.
And Nate, to close us out.
Yeah, I'm gonna unfortunately do a quick plug. As you all know, you're involved with Sneak. All of this information we're discussing, some of the stuff we've referenced, a lot of the stuff Brandy has sent in the chat is on sneak.info. If you want to see kind of various points in advocacy, it's a great place to check out the difference between Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and look at how different states, what their goals are, right? Because Massachusetts is attempting to pass a bill, New Hampshire is attempting to maintain funding, increase funding. Other states are just working on relationship building. And then finally, if you have any advocacy questions, whether it's the state, local, or national level, feel free to reach out to us at SASA. It's mysasa.org. With your questions. Collectively, us on staff and interns have over 30 years of advocacy experience. We've done it all. We've seen it all from every level. So if you need help, have any questions, or curious, want to do more, feel free to reach out. As well, stay involved in Sneak. It is a wonderful program.
And now I'd like to turn it over to Brandy to speak for a moment about 99H.
Yeah, hi. So a lot of you guys have heard about 99H. The fact that Arjit and Ava are both located here in Michigan, where I'm located as well. But the thing that we need to realize is 99H has been around for well over a decade. Where we're at right now is the culmination of 10 years or more worth of effort by hundreds and hundreds of teams throughout the state of Michigan and their students and their mentors. So when you're getting started and you're looking at 99H, it can be a little bit overwhelming. I have actually been involved with 99H since it started. I was a mentor for my team back in the day. We were doing a demo at our local farmers market, and a guy walked up and was like, "Hey, can I drive your robot?" turns out he was our senator, and that's how we earned our vote for him to pass 99H in Michigan. So if you guys have any questions about like the history of 99H, kind of where it started with just over $1 million worth of funding, where we're at right now at over $6.5 million worth of funding, I'm happy to talk to you all about it. And then additionally, my piece of advice to leave for you guys is remember that when you go and talk to these representatives, that the way that the bill is now does not mean that's the way the bill always has to be. You are welcome to discuss with your legislators the changes that you want to see, that you want to see increases in funding, that you want to see additional programs be added to these bills. And while it might be a little bit of work to go in and read the bills that already exist, sometimes teaming up with the people who have already made these bills and making it a collaboration instead of a competition for a race for this funding can make such a huge impact, because these legislators want to create the largest impact that they can with what already exists, right? So that's my advice to you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Brandy. And to give our closing remarks, I'd like to turn it over to Nick Galati.
Thanks, Joe. You guys did a great job today. Thank you, Brandy, for talking about 99H. Thank you to our panelists, Nate, Arjit, Ava, and Olivia. You did a great job. And thank you again, Joe, for facilitating the whole thing. My name's Nick. I'm the one who kind of started this program like 7 years ago in New England, trying to get us off the ground. And I started just by attending NAC, the National Advocacy Conference, many years ago. As part of the closing, I just want to review a few things, make sure everyone's on the same page as to what we're doing in New England. First off, if you haven't yet, please go to our website, sneak.info, and register. Yeah, you're already here, but if you register, then we can keep you updated on the advocacy efforts going on in your state. This way we can all be on the same page, make sure we're all doing the same thing, and everything else. Additionally, each state has their own specific page. Go read through what's on that page. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of helpful information there. We also have a lot of training on the website. Training is really important. Like, you don't understand how important it is until you've been through this. The training includes what is advocacy. Like, we talked a lot about it in this, but the training goes in a little more detail and helps you figure out what it is. We also have videos on what effective meetings are and how to schedule your meetings, who you could meet with. You don't necessarily have to meet with your representative. You don't have to meet with your senator. You can meet with one of the legislative aides. That's almost sometimes better, and you'll find out why in these videos. Some states have videos about how a bill becomes a law in their state and how education funding works. That means how does like the state determine how much funding each school district gets. And in Massachusetts, we have a video specific to the bills we're trying to pass, so you can learn more about that bill. All this training is really important, and you should really go through this either as yourself or as part of your team so you can be more effective in your advocacy efforts. We also, and when it does come time to schedule some meetings, we will email everyone about an advocacy day. Each state will have an advocacy day. That is a day where we send everyone to their state capital to talk to their representatives and senators. We try to schedule it as a single day. That way you have the largest impact. And if you get to see each other teams together, you get to collaborate. Like if multiple teams have the same senator, you as a group will meet with that senator at one time. And you could go through all that. These advocacy days, some of them might be coming up soon. Some of them may not happen until April. When the time comes, we'll email everyone and give you the additional information. And we'll help you schedule the meetings. We'll help you with everything. On our website, we have a bunch of information to help you with these meetings. Some of them include sample emails to send out to your legislators to get ask for a meeting. Others are some things you could talk about, some talking points. We also have some materials you could bring with us. Each state has a little different materials. In Massachusetts, we have these 3 here. Maine has some VEX specific things. We're working on including more FIRST and VEX stuff on every state. And the other thing to be aware of is we've been talking a lot about the national or the state level, but you also can get involved at the local level. You can meet with your Board of Ed. You can meet with your mayor. You can meet with your principal. It's all advocacy. You're talking to them. You're trying to get support for your team. Everything you can do can help. So one of the big questions you might be asking yourself is, what am I asking for? What are we trying to do? In Connecticut, Maine, Rhode Island, and Vermont, you're all kind of in the same state. You're trying to get started. Some of you might be a little further along than others, but you're all in around the same area. And as part of that is you need to build relationships with your legislators. You need to get that relationship built. The better they know you, the more likely they want to help you out. And then hopefully one team will find a champion among their legislators. This is key. Like Olivia in Massachusetts, she ended up working at one in that, and then Representative Sina is the one who decided, like, we need a bill for this, and is working on making it happen. And something similar happened in Michigan, where I think it was actually the governor who got behind it. You need to find that one person on the inside who is willing to push it, and then that is where you start. Not every representative, not every senator will be that person, but one team will find that person, and that's the best way to get going. In New Hampshire, you already have the Robotics Education Development Grant. It's important that you, when you meet with your representatives, you express how valuable these grants are and how they help you out. And I don't know the exact state of how it works for you in New Hampshire, but maybe you want it to be grown and have a larger grant available. That's something you can advocate for. It's also always important to make sure that they know, and by talking to them, it's also important to let them know it exists, because they may not know it exists. And so if it comes up for a vote as to whether to keep it or not, if they know it's being valuable to their constituents, they're more likely to keep it. And in Massachusetts, we did some talking about this, but we're asking everyone in Massachusetts, ask your legislators to co-sponsor the bills that we have in there. One's in the House, one's in the Senate. We want to get this passed. We need to get funding for all the teams in Massachusetts. The other thing to be aware of is the National Advocacy Conference. This is a conference in Washington, D.C. You go down there, you learn about this stuff and more. It's June 23rd to 25th. You end up meeting with your representatives and senators down there, and you can find out more info at mysasa.org. I would like to put a big thank you out to everyone who helped put this event together. In addition to the panelists you saw earlier, we have REC, we have New England First, we have some people from SASA, and then these are the people from Connecticut, Maine, and Massachusetts. We are always looking for more people who want to help us out. If there's no videos on the website for your state, for example, there's an opportunity there for your team or you to go and create these videos for us. The more help we get, the better we can do for every state. Now, this is essentially the end of the meeting, but Maine, you are going to have another session coming up from 12 to 1 p.m. Jamie has already sent the link out to all of you, and I saw it also in the chat. So join that session. And in Connecticut after lunch, there are more sessions at University Day if you happen to be there in person. I want to thank everyone so much, and we'll see you all soon.